everyone. Today we're digging into a document that asks a pretty provocative question about the future of the UK. We're going to break down the specific warning signs it lays out, sticking directly to what the text itself says. And that's the question right there. Word for word, it's the title and the entire focus of the source material we're looking at. So our job here is simply to unpack its answer, using its own framework and its own terminology. So where do we start? Well, the document first defines what it even means by a tipping point. Then it lays out 4 key areas to watch: attacks on authority, the targeting of specific places, some really deep societal divides, and finally, sabotage of the nation's infrastructure. Right. First things first. Before we can really get into the warning signs, we've got to be clear on what the source actually means when it uses the phrase tipping point. And here it is. This is the core idea of the whole document. According to this source, the tipping point isn't one single dramatic event. Instead, it's the moment that political violence stops being this shocking, rare thing and just becomes a regular, almost predictable part of life. Something that happens week in, week out. Okay, so the first category of indicators that the source brings up focuses on direct attacks against the state itself, targeting its power and the people who represent it. The document points to 2 pretty alarming signs here. On one hand, you have regular violent attacks targeting the police, and on the other, a political climate that's become so dangerous that every single member of parliament needs their own security detail. And the source uses this quote to really draw a line in the sand. The argument it's making is that the threat level would have moved way beyond what we've seen before. Things like protest acts. This would signal a whole new level of danger for anyone in public office. All right, so the next warning sign we're going to look at shifts the focus. It's not about targeting people anymore, but about targeting places. Specifically, the document talks about arson becoming a recurring event against certain buildings. And the document is incredibly specific about the targets it identifies: housing for migrants and mosques. But the key thing here, just like before, is that word regular. We're not talking about isolated one-off tragedies. The source is talking about a pattern. So this third indicator, this one paints a picture of a society that has become totally fractured, a country that is, quite literally, dividing itself up into separate territories. And to describe this kind of division, the document uses the very charged and, let's be honest, highly controversial term no-go zones to refer to what it describes as ethnic enclaves. This slide really shows that stark two-sided vision that's being presented in the source material. The country is basically split into these red zones, the so-called no-go zones, and then a rapidly shrinking number of green zones, which the document claims are for the native population. Okay, that brings us to the final category of warning signs, and this one is all about sabotage, specifically attacks that target the country's essential public infrastructure. Here we go again with that word regular. But the source adds another crucial detail. This isn't just about random vandalism. It's directed sabotage, which implies a coordinated, purposeful effort to disrupt the whole country. And here's where the source makes a really critical distinction, at least in its own terms. It attributes that directed sabotage to a group it specifically labels native rebels. And it contrasts that with what it calls wrecking stuff for the fun of it, which it attributes to a completely different group it labels foreign invaders. So let's just pull this all together. According to this source, the tipping point isn't any single one of these things. No, it's the moment when all of them are happening at once. It's when this whole cocktail of violence and division becomes a predictable, regular part of life in the UK. And that leaves us with a final thought to chew on. When you really look at what a source chooses to highlight as a warning sign, from the specific targets of arson to the use of terms like no-go zones, you're not just learning about the topic. You're actually getting a really clear window into the specific fears and the unique worldview of the author themselves.